What up, everybody, and welcome back to yet another Sound of Violence podcast. We are an MMA podcast to let you know the MMA podcast you should catch, skip, and can't miss each week, as well as we try and check out a new show. I am Pulver. I am not in full breed mode this week, unlike last week. And I'm here with my co-host, Chris Madaffer. How's it going, man?
Doing great, man. Have a very interesting beer, one that I've showed off before here on the show.
I'm excited.
But everything's good, man. Finally lining up, getting a job. It's not that fun being unemployed.
I hear that.
Yeah, got an interview next week, so I'm going to get back into the workforce, you know?
There you go. Well, actually, speaking of jobs, since you've been looking for a brewery gig, right?
Yep.
So speaking of which, we actually did brew over the weekend at your house.
Yes, we did. I remember we teased that before we did it, and it was how did you like it, man? I know you've homebrewed before, but how did you like the whole set? I know I told you my dad, that dude spoils stuff as far as his whole fucking setup he has, but I think the hazy IPA will turn out pretty good. I don't see why not.
Yeah,
I think it'll at least be drinkable.
The recipe was at least legit because it had flaked oats, so that's like a go-to. But yeah, it was fun, man. Your dad's setup is ridiculous, just like everything else about your dad's place. Chris's dad's place is pimp as shit. He's got full bar. He's got also a tap wall outside of the bar. That's where he just keeps other shit. It's a dope setup. But his like, brewing setup was dope as hell too.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm definitely say I want to like do homebrew, I would definitely do the same thing, invest some money on the side, and just get like a badass kit. I think that'd be fun.
For sure, yeah. And then actually, like all in all, it wasn't that bad when it came to clean up and everything. Sometimes when you like start getting to that level, there's a lot of shit to clean, but your dad has it at like a good balance to where you're not spending 4 fucking hours cleaning.
Yeah, no, it's pretty straightforward. Anyways, I'll let you get into it first. I think we saw what you had in your hand.
That's right.
Doug, what is it? The Doug Stanhope? No, what is it? Papa Vodka presents Doug Stanhope presents, or
it is. We both always butcher that, but I am drinking this week to be on brand. I am drinking the Chronic Ale from Pizza Port, which is fucking a go-to. It's delicious.
Well, that's just kind of like that's my value pack six pack of pints. I mean,
yeah.
If I were the deciding person as far as marketing your beer, I wish all pints could come in 6 packs. But I get it. Some of the breweries they don't want to do that.
Well, and Pizza Port's just been dope as hell, and they stay dope as hell. Like they make such good fucking beer. Swami IPA is like a go-to anytime I see it. I pick it up. And they're of course bacon and eggs. I've drank on this podcast a bunch. I love that beer, and for $20 for 6 pints is a great fucking deal for that beer. So
see, I remember I saw the price of that and I was like, fuck. I remember when I bought this like 2 years ago and it was like $13. They got the idea that it was really good. Anyways, so this is appeared on here. It's Firestone Walker. It's their Luponic Distortion, their IPA rotating series. They have,
which are all delicious,
a very crazy variety of flavors. One of them I had before was like peach ring with like pineapple and like pear, something crazy. This time, so here it's the same old logo, except this time you got tangerine flavor. I don't know if you can see that. Tangerine. You have strawberry gummy, I think is what it said, which is interesting. And then you have honeydew melon.
That sounds pretty goddamn good.
So we're going to go ahead and give a preliminary thought.
There we go. Firestone Walker is low-key one of the best breweries on the fucking planet. People don't give that place nearly as much respect as it deserves. Their fucking Pivo Pills is so goddamn good.
Doesn't help I ate right before this, so I'll give it a second. But once I collect my thoughts on that, after my palate is done being interrupted by food, I'll let you know that first off, it's pretty fucking smooth, so that's good.
That's what's up. So Chronic, quickly I'll touch on before we get into picks. For the Chronic Ale, it's not my favorite of theirs because I'm not a big amber ale guy. I guess the amber I probably like best is probably the Karl Strauss amber, I guess. which is pretty good.
The Columbia Street.
Yeah, whatever it is. That thing's had a couple names since I've had it first. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big amber guy. It's they're too much like too many things for them to be really up my alley, but very drinkable. And yeah, everything Pete Sport makes is fucking fantastic. Cool. Well, do you want to jump into picks and then you can talk about that beer while we're going?
So picks as far as our segment, or do we want to
get right into as far as catch, skip, and can't miss?
Gotcha. So the catch, I believe. So there's a caveat. One of these, and it's a catch. The other catch is an off-topic. Or I always fuck that up too. The one where it's a non-MMA podcast,
right? I believe it's the co-main event inspired name of Fights for the podcast for the well-rounded fight fan.
Yeah. So I'll get into the catch. That's an MMA podcast, of course. Heavy hands. I like the cold open. I can't remember the name of the guy that Connor was talking about. They were kind of like shit talking
Sean McCorkle to each other. And it was hilarious.
Sean McCorkle.
They're fucking back funny. And forth. And Sean McCorkle, I forget what he called his asshole, but it was something very offensive.
Something with Connor's dad and someone's asshole.
Yeah,
there's something like that.
Yeah, Sean was going off.
So Connor and Phil, they think that they both got the last two fights right in what the fighters would bring to the table in the style matchup itself. According to Phil, they got their defense wrong. I think it was mostly the co-main event. I think they underestimated Adesanya's defense, which probably a lot of people did. Phil admits Max is a defensively vulnerable fighter when moving backwards. That's a good point, but to be fair, too, we haven't really seen too many matchups lately where someone's putting the pressure on like a Poirier can, or because at featherweight, who's really like a really big pressure? Frankie Edgar. I mean, they haven't fought yet. Frankie Edgar likes to go forward a lot and then just kind of transition, level change. Who knows if that fight's next or if Volkanovski beats Aldo? That's a whole.
Volkanovski is the go-to pressure fighter at that way, and that fight would be fire.
Yeah, look what he did to Chad fucking Mendez. That was nuts.
Yep.
Poirier has a much better defense than they've both given him credit for in the past. He's one of the best active guard users in all of the UFC. I know he uses the Philly shell. I can't really remember how to describe the Philly shell, but it's kind of more. Is it when you're moving laterally and it's kind of like you're able to kind of block? I can't remember what the fuck it is. So I know Jack Slack.
I'm terrible with these fucking names because everybody has three names for everything. But I believe it's a style. I believe it's a lot of shelling up, and then like a Gaethje. Well, Gaethje kind of uses a Philly shell, but he doesn't really use it to slip or anything. I'm super half talking out of my ass because I always confuse it with three other things.
All I know is that I think it's like one of those weird, like boxers never uses, but you've seen it in professional boxing kind of guards.
I believe boxers used to use it a lot more back in the day, but nowadays you don't see it nearly as much. Although I could be talking about something else as well, because not gonna lie,
that's why I'll stop talking about it, because someone's probably like, "Wow, these guys are fucking idiots."
Not only that, but I've had a little bit of weed today, so if I start mixing stuff up, hey, at least I won't be slurring as bad this week, theoretically.
So, yeah, me as well. They both mentioned both Max and Dustin knew they had to come forward to land to complete. I typed this out wrong. But no, both fighters knew that, and if they're going to land any sort of combinations against this style of fighter, they'd have to come forward a lot. Max did get a lot of combos in later rounds. I think it was the third and the fourth for Max, but I can't. I want to watch that fight again.
That's when you started to definitely turn it back up.
Dustin Poirier's power was the main factor of how this fight turned out. I agree 100%. I looked at the stat metric, and just based on the stat metric, you'd think Holloway could win based on points and like strikes landed. But I looked at, it would say Poirier, I think it was like round 3 or 4, it would say 40 strikes landed, but then you go to significant strikes, 40. I was like, holy fuck. That means every single punch he landed was like clean. I was like, god damn.
Well, and it looked like it too. I mean, he was bouncing Holloway's head all over the place during that fight.
First round, he almost looked like he was going to fucking drop him.
Yeah, I thought he was.
I honestly thought, like, oh fuck, is the fight going to end soon? Like, this dude's getting fucking rocked.
Yeah, that main and co-main both were absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, thank God it saved that card. Well, that card wasn't bad overall. I mean, those two fights definitely helped.
Also, fucking
yeah,
Nikki Thrills coming out here looking like fucking Jean-Jacques Machado and shit.
That fight
actually maybe not Jean-Jacques Machado for obvious physical reasons, but coming out here looking like he knows jiu-jitsu and he didn't get fucking Von Flute in the first fight and almost Von Flute again by
he almost
Jan
did. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. So yeah, they said this was a fight where if the power wasn't a factor from Poirier, Max probably overwhelms him at the end of some of those rounds. I agree. Non-stop hooks and straights from Dustin backed Max up a lot. Phil says he can't see other lightweights being able to do that to Max. He said Dustin is the worst style matchup for Max at the weight class, in Phil's opinion. At this point, I'll disagree with that. I mean, I could feel like maybe Gaethje could give Max problems as well.
Yeah.
As far as his pressures. But
and also just especially with the size thing like that, like Gaethje's fucking power puncher. And like not as much as Dustin, but the pace he puts on, and Max has never historically dealt great with leg kicks. So
yeah. And that's the thing too. I wonder if we'll see. I think what happens is Max defends one more time at 145, and then I think he's like, fuck it, after he defends. If he defends successfully, or maybe regardless of that, I think he just goes up to 155. I think he puts on some more weight, or mass, I should say. Maybe bulk up a tiny bit.
I think he probably refines his weight cut also, because that dude already was like, I think he walks like 180, 190 already.
Yeah.
But his like the way he has to cut for 45 is way different than how you figure the cut for 55 would go. So I bet there's going to be some refining in that for sure.
And then I'll wrap this up quickly. They talked about the co-main event, which was Kelvin Gastelum versus Israel Adesanya. They give lots of credit to both fighters, especially Gastelum's durability, which, yeah, he should have been knocked out multiple times. But
everybody should have got knocked out during that fight. Yeah, there was some crazy shit going on.
They said, while his defense wasn't amazing, it was a big improvement. Yes. Oh, I think they're talking about Adesanya. No, maybe they're talking about Gastelum. I guess they're still talking about Gastelum. Yeah, that is true, because he did kind of leave. I mean, he's a shorter fighter. When he was like throwing those really, really wide like power hooks, he would just be like this, overextending, and then there's Adesanya to snipe him.
Yep.
So there's a couple corrections he can make. I mean, he was throwing the fucking kitchen sink at Adesanya, so there's that.
Real.
And because of that, they said a lot of people compare Adesanya to Anderson Silva, but they think he's more of an. They think Silva's more offensive minded. Well, no. They think Israel's more offensive minded, and Anderson's better defensively. Obviously,
was at some point, yeah.
Yeah.
Not so much anymore.
Yeah, they said Adesanya did a good job telegraphing Gastelum's punches at the end of that fight, and that fifth round was 10-8. I think I had it 2-2 going into that final round. I think something like that.
Sounds about right.
Hell of a fight. Definitely going to be fight of the year contender.
Yeah, it was a fucking wild scrap. It was a wild ass scrap. I believe Trevor, who's been on this podcast before, said to me, he's like, oh, yeah, I heard fucking Chris yelling, or maybe it was Blake, one of the two of them. It's like, oh, I heard Chris yelling from the other room. And I knew some shit was popping off, so. Which, like, yeah, if you watched that fight and didn't yell at some point, you probably just, I don't think you can get up for anything. Like that,
yeah.
That was some crazy back and forth in that fight, so. Cool, man.
So how about you? What is your catch?
So do you have Joe Rogan anywhere on your list this week?
Are you asking if I do? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
okay, then I'm not going to talk about that one because I had a feeling it's not the Brendan Schaub one, right?
No.
So we'll talk about that in a bit because that was going to be one of my catches. But the one I did want to talk about. So there's a podcast called We Are Risen, or actually it's called We Are Risen, confirmed, even though I believe Risen was one of the organizations who originally got real mad at everybody for not pronouncing it correctly, or like classic DAZN style. But anyway, we are Rising episode 40. That show I've talked about it in the past. Their audio is a little rough, but they had Lenny Hart on, and it was just fantastic. It was a really, really good interview. You know who Lenny Hart is, right?
Not really ringing a bell.
If I said the announcer Lenny Hart, does that ring a bell?
I'd probably know. Like I'd probably like if I hear.
If I said crazy Pride lady, does that ring a bell?
I don't know.
You
probably.
So you've watched plenty of Pride fights. You know the crazy lady who yells the intros?
Yeah, I know that.
That's Lenny Hart.
Oh, I thought you were saying. Oh, when I hear Lenny, or is it Lenny as in like short for Leonard?
Yeah. No, short for Lenne, which is her name, Lenny.
Oh, okay. See, I was picturing a man like Lenny something.
I should have clarified. No. But
yeah,
so Lenny Hart is of course a legend. And why I really like the interview, I feel like a lot of times, especially announcers, can be real fucking. They can sound like Bruce Buffer sometimes, and when they do interviews and they talk to people, and where you're like, there's a clear wall between who you actually are and what is coming out of your mouth right now. Whereas Lenny just seems super honest and fun. She called herself crazy like 10 seconds into the interview. And she just talks about how she originally got the job with Pride. The one thing during the episode, the reason why really this isn't a can't miss for me is because the audio, like they both sound like they're using headset mics, which some headset mics are better than others, but they're all pretty not great. And then the other problem is there was a rough Skype delay, so there's a lot of stepping on each other, which is inevitable. But when you have 3 people on a podcast, all with different Skype delays, and they're all trying to talk to each other, it gets real hectic real quick. But other than that, that's the only gripe I have about it. It was fantastic. Lenny talks about her process for announcing and how at one point she talks about a conversation she had with Bruce Buffer, who asked him, or who told him at one point that, or the powers that be told him that they wanted him to be more like Lenny in the intros and a little bit more bombastic, which he ended up doing, if you remember the early Bruce Buffer announcements. So it's just interesting. They talk a little bit about fixed fights in Japan. She talks about how she called the intro for the Floyd fight while having influenza in like 106-degree temperature.
Holy shit.
Yeah. She said she literally called, like, did the announcement and then went and lied down back in the back and like couldn't do anything. She also talks a bit about how she did the voiceover in Fatal Frame and Shenmue for a couple characters, which was cool.
Oh yeah, or those like those isn't Shenmue like the PlayStation where you walk around, it's like a detective thing?
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think I saw them ridiculous. I think they're making a new one that's coming out this year
with the fucking gotcha machines, and it's just ridiculous. God, everybody go watch the Giant Bomb playthrough of Shenmue. It's fucking ridiculous. That game does not hold up well. You're fucking terrible forklift races and shit. And then let's see. Oh, she talks about announcing a quintet, and they talk a lot about that all-female tournament that happened. So it's just a very fun interview. I really enjoyed it. They're very genuine, and she's very genuine about the whole thing. She doesn't come off, I don't know, kind of distant as a lot of announcers can come off when they talk to you in person. It's like just very personable and a lot of fun. And she does the crazy Lenny Hart laugh, and she does the classic didgeridoo announcement or fight, whatever the fuck that's called. That I forget who she did it for, but it's just a lot of fun. She's a lot of fun in that, so highly recommend checking that out. That was We Are Rising episode 40. Cool, man. You want to jump us into the MMA podcast you recommend people skip this week? I guess I should give the Eugene S. Robinson style disclaimer. Just because we say to skip your podcast this week doesn't mean we hate you or we hate your podcast. Doesn't even mean that your podcast isn't good most weeks. Just this week, it was not worth the time it took to listen to it. Or we have something against you, and it's totally you, bro. So you have a skip this week?
Yeah. So it was the first, the early episode from Believe You Me. I know they do 2 a week, so the one on Monday, I believe. I don't know when they recorded this. They just kept talking about how they were very hyped on Game of Thrones.
Oh, must have been
that Sunday before the episode came out. And yeah, they're like greatest TV show ever, blah blah blah, whatever. They're talking about, did you have trouble loading pay-per-view on ESPN Plus? Sure. Michael then said the last 2 fights of that card were 2 of the best they've ever seen. Talked about the 10-8 round that Adesanya got. Michael had to even go into the round. I agree as well. Michael had a lot of praise for Adesanya getting up quickly after being taken down. Has very underrated takedown defense. Talk about Adesanya beefing with John Jones. Sets up a future bout.
I like how everybody felt the need to talk about that this week, even though it's never going to happen and it's a waste of everybody's time. Okay, I won't say never. I'm saying not until 2021 are we going to see that fight. So why the fuck do we care?
So Mike felt like an asshole because Theo Vaughn was texting him before the fight saying, "Oh, who do you think is going to win, Mike?" And he was a little too honest and said he thought Max was going to take it. And he's like, "Yeah." Theo didn't reply, and he's like, "Fuck, I'm an asshole." You know.
That's hilarious. Actually, Theo talked about that on his podcast this week that he did with Dustin Poirier, which is pretty cool.
They discussed Poirier versus Khabib hype, and the reason why I skipped for me is because Lewis kept talking about Conor this, Conor that, and yeah, I was just like, dude. I mean,
Lewis knows like 6 guys in the sport at this point, which he openly admits. Like, there's a couple weeks where he comes on and he just says like, "Oh yeah, I didn't watch any of the fights last weekend. I saw highlights on Twitter." You're like, bro, maybe not an MMA podcast anymore, huh?
I just realized something. I forgot to get my laptop charger. My laptop don't want it to die during recording, so I will be right back.
That's hilarious. Well, while Chris does that, I will get into my skip for this week. My skip for this week is the MMA Reporters, episode 14. Oh, good. Chris didn't mute his mic, so if he has to take a piss during this, we will know. So the MMA Reporters, episode 14, this is Ariel's show that he does with guests. It's basically the MMA beat, but for ESPN. And all I really have to say about this is it's Ariel Helwani and Gareth Davies. So if you thought I would be into a podcast with Ariel Helwani and Gareth Davies in it, that's a real shot in the dark. It's possible. They've done good things, but does it sound like promotion and not like journalism. I will put it that way. So we will see with that shit. I will get into that more here in a second, but I think Chris is almost back with his... Oh, God, I jumped the gun. He's not back yet. Here, I'll go to drinking and talking about Chronic Ale from Pizza Port. It's fantastic. You back? Boom. I was just talking about, what else did you have on your skip for Believe You Me? Anything?
Yes, I am.
That's about all I had on that show.
Just once he started talking about Conor this, Conor that, like the marketability is or Lewis is what he's like. He's like, I think Conor should just fight Dustin, and then, or what did he say? Yeah, he said, I don't know what the fuck he's talking about. He lost me. So
that was the main reason for a skip this week for you, right? Is just like all the Conor talk for no reason.
Yeah, it's like, dude, the guy. I mean, obviously he's not really retired. Dude, just off his rocker. He's in trouble or in potential trouble, whatever. I don't know. I don't want to hear that guy's name. The only lightweight fight I care about right now is Dustin versus Khabib. If Conor's going to come back, it should either be against Nate for just some money draw fight, or he should fight Tony Ferguson, because I would love to see Tony beat him.
Yeah, but I don't want to see Tony come back for like another couple months. Just like take time.
That's true though too. Yeah, if you're Tony, you might as well just wait for the winner of, because they'll just give you the title shot anyway.
I mean, yeah, he should get it when he comes back, but I'd like to see him take a good amount of time. Let's see. Cool. Yeah, well, like I was talking about, my skip for this week is the MMA Reporters, which is Ariel Helwani's show. That's like the MMA beat, but for ESPN. And the reason why is because it's just him and Gareth Davies hanging out talking. And you know Gareth A. Davies, the old British dude with the long hair, who like is just like blowing Till every time he gets a chance until Till loses.
Oh, let me see his face. I think...
And then talks afterwards about how he actually didn't have Till going into that fight. You're like,
or
no, you know what? He said he thought Thompson beat Till is what he said.
You said Gareth Davies?
Yeah, Gareth A. Davies.
Oh, okay. I need to put in the A because Gareth Davies is a professional rugby player.
Oh, yeah.
Evidently.
Maybe that's why he uses the A. I figure it's just because he has that.
This motherfucker. This guy looks like. I mean, I don't know him personally. He's probably a really nice guy, but I look at him. It looks like Ozzy Osbourne fused with Scott Stapp of Creed. Swear to God.
Okay. I would have gone with.
Yeah, that's.
I don't know. I would have gone with Paul McCartney crossed with Robin Black, but I get you.
That works too. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't hate Gareth. To be fair, he just bugs me much in the same way Kevin Iole or any other journalist who just goes out and basically does PR for the UFC constantly. I can't fuck with it. It's really frustrating for me. Looking at you, Chuck Mindenhall, who I know I've had words with on Twitter, that did not go in my favor.
I was gonna say, I told you about that guy, the Schmo, right? And I told you.
Oh yeah,
the Reddit loves that guy now. And he used to be, I don't know if he still does anymore, but the guy was like a legit like broadcast journalist in Chicago. Anyways, he's like embraced now by like Reddit and everything. And I was looking at that guy's YouTube channel. That guy gets like legit fucking interviews. Like, he interviewed like Amir Khan, like Terrence Crawford, some other boxers. Like, holy shit. I think it's kind of interesting though. We kind of needed something like that. Because what's ironic about that guy's character is that he's asking questions you or I would ask the fighter.
Well, Borat journalism works like a mother. Bullshit. Yeah, Borat journalism works like a motherfucker. Just does.
Yeah.
So mostly they just talk about boxers. Gareth Davies talks about what Ariel calls as an amazing story about. I'm using air quotes for anyone not watching. But yeah, basically Gareth talks about he did a story in search of the boys of Stockton looking for Nick and Nate Diaz. The whole story is about how he never got in touch with Nick and Nate Diaz because they're Nick and Nate Diaz. And so instead he just talked to like Gil Melendez and Jake Shields about it feels like the scrap pack's going to make a big return. You're like, what fucking dude? All right. I mean, isn't Gil still suspended? Is that over yet?
Yeah. That sounds like, what year is it?
Yeah. Also, Jake Shields doesn't fight for the UFC anymore. Also,
this is like 2010.
Nick has publicly said he's not interested in fighting. Also, Nate is not getting paid enough to actually compete. Like, return is a real strong one. It's just a lot of that. He also says shit like he wants Nate versus Habib and Nick versus Connor, where you're like, what is that? I'm so angry about so many parts of that statement. And then he acts all surprised when Ariel's like, I don't think that's gonna happen. He also says he's close with Kelvin and wanted him to beat Israel Adesanya, which, like, good journalism, bro. Pretty sure you covered that event.
Yeah.
So, can't really do that.
Supposed to admit that, but
well, and you can, but for sure do it beforehand, not afterwards.
Yeah, no, that's the thing,
right?
Or just be objective and say this should be a great fight. And would you say, if I were a betting man, you just do a little euphemism, or
you John Anik that, except you don't use the phrase "if I were a betting man" because that implicates you and how much you actually bet all the time.
Yeah, shouts out to John Anik, but
straight up.
But yeah, no, I mean, I wouldn't phrase it like that. But if you say, if I,
I got you.
You know what I mean. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't say if I were a betting man, because it looks like you're. Hey, that's like, hey, I just wrote a story about I'm putting money on the other guy.
Yeah,
good luck.
If I was doing things that are very ethically questionable. Anyway, yeah, it's just a skip for all those reasons. It's a lot more of the same stuff. Like a lot of talk about, of course, Israel Adesanya versus John Jones. ESPN keeps beeping the word shit every time he says it, which, like, what the fuck? It's two dudes who are only followed by adults on an ESPN platform, which is mostly only watched by adults, talking about people fighting with their fucking fists in a cage, but can't play the word shit without a beep over it. Drives me goddamn nuts. And then, oh yeah, he complains a lot about bare knuckle boxing, and he complains about being annoyed because young reporters don't look up to guys like him and Kevin Iole. That's a literal thing he talked about, which is like, oh, you mean the two shills who aren't reporters but are PR people? Gotcha. You want the young
Kevin
Mike
Iole,
Bond to be super excited about you, huh?
Yeah,
I think they're specifically mad at guys like Jordan Breen who are like constantly making fun of how they're just mouthpieces.
Yeah.
So it's frustrating. You can tell why it's a skip. So
cool.
Cool, man. Well, why don't you jump into your show that you recommend people can't miss this week?
So I listened to probably about 2/3 of this. It was a can't miss for me because I love this fighter. I love the show's format. It was JRE, of course, but with Jorge Masvidal, George Masvidal.
Yeah, episode 63.
Yes. Yeah. I watched this live too, so rough notes on here.
Yeah.
So let's see. From what I remembered that I wrote down.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, Jorge has been fighting professionally since he was 18. He did martial arts like Taekwondo when he was a teenager, but I think he said his mom didn't like it, or maybe it's his dad. Someone didn't like him doing like traditional martial arts. They're like, oh, we don't want you to get hurt or some shit. You know, parents worrying about their kids' safety. I get that. I know Jorge seemed pretty intense during this interview, which is ironic because he seems pretty chill. I don't know. I think it was mostly because Joe kept bugging him with the whole Ben Askren.
Yep.
Height and say, well, a lot of people like Ben, and he's just like, no, I don't. He's a fucking idiot. He talked about the whole keep that same energy kind of thing. You know, don't say, hey man, great fight, good luck to you when you're just trolling. Yeah, he praised Ben's wrestling, that kind of thing. One thing I heard though is he said he evidently got the best of Ben in a wrestling scramble or some sort of little wrestling thing they had when Ben was visiting ATT. This was years ago. I'm not going to call Jorge a liar. I don't want to say you dumped Ben on his head. I mean, anything's possible, but I doubt that just because unless Ben wasn't going all 100%. Don't get me wrong. It's very possible he did that, but
I mean, Robbie Lawler did it.
Yeah, Robbie Lawler didn't. So, but I'm only doubting it because he was saying it's purely like a wrestling thing they're doing.
Yeah.
Unless you're at the Olympic Training Center with him and Marty, maybe. But,
exactly. There was some funny shit on.
But
I know they talked about Bodog for a bit, which was funny. Hearing the old Bodog stories about how they blew through all the money by just sending everybody to Costa Rica for cards and shit like that.
Oh, I remember I heard Chael on his podcast about. Yeah, I remember I fought Alexei Olenek during Bodog.
Yep. That was actually a really good podcast. He talks about how Bodog got started.
Yeah,
that was a good one. That almost made actually one of my catches.
He had Chael had like two ads the whole time, and the one was great.
Yeah, it wasn't that bad on the ads, and then also it was just overall like pretty fun episode. So yeah, it almost made a catch for me this week, but no Joel, so no catch.
That's just a mention. Put out there to listen to that.
Straight up, yeah, me too. It was on my list. Jorge also talked about doing shrooms while skiing, which was real fun.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I remember that. But then Joe's like, wait, but what about you getting potentially hurt? He's like, well, that's a risk sometimes I take. I like to ski.
Yeah.
I like to go down the slopes.
He's like, I learned not to go too deep.
I think they discussed, like, what do you think of the main event? I think they both had Poirier. Well, of course, Jorge did. That's one of his training partners. He said at worst he scored that 48-47. That's how I scored it. I just gave him that last round, and I was like, that's 3 rounds for me. I think I gave Max the 3rd and the 4th. I think I did.
I did too. I'd have to double check. I haven't gone back and rewatched it recently, so. And I just watched a bunch of fucking Russians all week, so everything kind of is a takedown blur at this point because this fucking card we're talking about later. Oh boy.
Oh, I see what my problem was. So next time I'm going to have to rewatch this again because watching it live and then trying to recall what I heard is a lot to do, especially when I listen to like 2 hours of it.
Yep.
So because I just noticed I had some notes from Half the Battle mixed in here.
Oh, there you go.
I like fucking indent it. But no, it was solid overall. Jorge seems like a really cool guy. I know he was pretty bugged with the whole Askren talk. I don't think he was too bothered by it, but he's like, all right, I'm done talking about this fucking guy. They asked. Well, I remember Joe was pushing his buttons a little bit. He's like, "Oh, who are you fighting? What's his name rhyme with?" He says, "I don't want to make this guy famous." He's like, "Does it rhyme with Dolby?"
Yeah,
I thought that was pretty funny. Because even though I totally forgot he said this, Jorge said he'll fight Colby for the belt.
I heard this week on a show I'm going to talk about here in a couple minutes that they're not really that cool anymore.
Oh well.
And I heard it from a dude who would know recent news about Jorge Masvidal. So I'll talk about that here in a minute. His name may or may not rhyme with Colby.
Yeah. Oh, I won't spoil what podcast he was on. I think I saw this. I don't know. But that's what I had because I watched it live. I'm not down for watching it live. I saw the notification. I was like, fuck it, let's watch it now. But it was a very good podcast. I love hearing what that guy has to say. Very authentic, especially where he comes from. He's just kind of like a fighter's fighter, really.
Yeah, it was a fun one for sure. I really liked it. And yeah, it's always fun hearing that dude on there talking about fucking the weeds game in Florida and how fucked up it is. And
yeah, having to smoke wax all the time. It's like, fuck all
training
that.
Training with dudes like Yoel. Yeah, man, it was definitely a fun one. So my can't miss this week is actually kind of 3 episodes of a very similar kind of show. So the MMA Vivisection for Ryzen 15 and the MMA Vivisection, both the prelims and main card for UFC St. Petersburg. Basically, if you want a breakdown of the people or of all the fighters and the matchups, these are one of the few people actually doing solid breakdowns on this card. I noticed like them, Dan, Tom, of course, the Half the Battle and all the betting guys are pretty much the only ones talking about it. Everybody else essentially bailed on all of this card. So I think Heavy Hands literally just talked about the main event. They're like, fucking, yeah. That'll come up later when Chris gets the bet coin out.
Yeah, you'll see how excited I am, guys.
Yeah, well, to be fair, I think a lot of these are gonna be fun matchups, but boy, is there no name value.
Yeah, sorry, cousin.
That's right. Let's go bowling. Anyway, yeah, overall, it's just fantastic. So the MMA Vivisection for Ryzen 15 is, of course, Zane, and then it's Eddie and Victor are both on. Eddie Mercado and Victor Rodriguez, and they go through and break down that card. They talk a lot about the matchups. At one point, they talk about Japan's weird love for bricked up women under 5'2", which is a thing. It's a real thing. So it's a real fun breakdown. Same with MMA Vivisection UFC St. Petersburg. I don't have detailed notes because it would literally just be me reading you their notes on the fights. So like at that point, what are we even doing? But it's just a lot of fun going back and forth on those. And also they did a more research than probably the majority of people will for all those. And yeah, although I guess Conor Rebos tried to do some research, but then Fight Pass failed him miserably, of course. So as it's one to do.
That's okay. So real quick, talking about Fight Pass, what was the deal again? Were the things that were on ESPN Plus not available yet on Fight Pass?
Correct. I don't know if they ever will be.
Content restriction now. Fuck, dude. So how the hell am I going to rewatch Till Masvidal? I mean, I have ESPN Plus.
On ESPN Plus.
Fuck. Okay, then I'll have to watch my computer because the app is absolute trash. You can't, at least on the phone. I don't know how to search on mobile.
It's not easy searching on desktop either. You basically just have to search fighters' names and then find the entire card and then scrub to the fight you want. It's not user friendly. It's very brutal. Fucking tape study for these recent cards are fucking rough. Also, they just didn't post some of the prelims. I don't know where the fuck they are. They're probably on ESPN, and which means they're not on the app, which is fucking insane. So,
yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah, it's gonna be a mess for sure. But yeah, they're just very good breakdown shows, and I highly recommend people check them out. I've listened to them forever. These were especially good ones, so give it a listen.
Oh yeah, man.
Cool. Did you check out any new shows this week?
Yeah, so at least I thought it was new, or I believe it's newish, at least new for me.
Yeah, new for you is all that matters.
Yeah, let's see. Oh, yeah, quick shout out. I'm not going to say the notes. Shout out to If I Did It's episode. That was really solid, I thought. They just discussed the whole lightweight division. Shout out to Half the Battle with Daniel Levy and Shaq. It was real good, real technical. I thought how they broke it down. Shout out real quick to Fights Gone By with your boy Jack Slack. So anyways, my new one, this was only about 17 minutes long. It was a quick little kind of recap of 236.
Nice.
It was called... Oh, it's called Combat Corner with Cyrus King.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
So he just said, the last two fights were crazy, kind of things we've heard. He liked the Joban versus Grant fight, even though he thought it was boring. He says one of those fights you can get up and go to the bathroom and come back, and it looks the exact same as it did.
Classic Eugene S. Robinson, don't care.
Yep. He says he thinks Joban won, so did I, but it wasn't a robbery. I agree. So Cyrus Top says he's not 100% sold on Izzy. He praised Izzy for his performance, but he's just talking about as far as if Whitaker fought him, well, and they will fight, he thinks Whitaker beats Izzy in 3 rounds, which I think is bold. I mean, at this point, I would take Robert Whitaker in their fight when it happens eventually.
Yeah, I got to, but man, Izzy looked real good there late.
Yeah, so I don't know. I can't wait for that fight. Do we already kind of talk about when do you think that will happen? Or, I mean, speculation.
It kind of depends.
They got to do it. They got to do it in Australia, right?
Yeah, that's the plan. I think they said either September or October. It kind of just depends on where everybody's at physically at that point. Because both those dudes had rough fucking physical.
Because Dustin and Habib's going to be in Abu Dhabi, right?
That's the plan. Although Habib said he wasn't coming back till October because he was going to sit out as long as his teammates were suspended. So.
I thought I just saw him tweet the other day, ready in September.
Again, that doesn't surprise me. Yeah, the Abu Dhabi date is the one that even Dustin mentioned it on this past weekend with Theo Vaughn this week. That's what everybody expects. So we'll see.
Yeah. So I'm hyped on it. That was my new one that I just had to shout out.
Yeah, that sounds cool. What was the name of that again?
It was called Combat Corner with Cyrus King.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've listened to that before, but because it definitely sounds familiar. Let's see. So my new shows for this week, I listened to 2. One of them, however, was only like 50-something seconds long because it's called the MMA Minute. I listened to the April 16th, 2019 one because it had Leslie Smith's name in it, and I was like, all right, well, if they have Leslie Smith on, turns out they don't have Leslie Smith on. It's essentially a 60-second show where they just break down news that happened. However, my problem with it is the first 15 seconds of the show are all the intro and an ad, and it's a 60-second show. So the last 45 minutes is just super loud music that makes it hard to hear. Yeah, sorry, 45 seconds.
That confused. Like, wait,
yeah,
what?
No, the last 45 seconds is super loud music, which makes it hard to hear the headlines that they're reading. Just headlines, no context. It's just there's a lot of fluff on that show and not a lot of actual filler or any value add. So yeah, if you want a show like that, TJ DeSantis and Rob Tatum do the daily wrap on the Between Rounds Patreon, and that is, I think, a far cleaner version of what that show's going for. Even if they just turned down the fucking music in the background, it would be better. But
so maybe they should just have the length be 1:15 because of the intro,
or maybe you don't need a fucking 15-second intro on a 40 or on a 60-second show. Jesus Christ, what are we doing? Podcast, unless it's a Podcast One sponsored podcast. I don't see why you.
I would just do that thing where you just do the all right, start the timer, some bullshit, and you just get right into it and start going.
Right.
You don't have to say that, but it kind of gives you a clue. Especially listening. Oh fuck, here comes the minute.
Also, just because it's called the MMA Minute doesn't mean it has to be 60 seconds. Just shouts out to Ariel who told us all that those are just words and they don't really mean anything.
Yeah.
An hour could be 4, really, if you want. Anyway, so that was one new show that I listened to. I'm underwhelmed by it. A new show I did listen to that I really liked, however, was, did you know Ben Askren and Front Row Brian have a show? I think I mentioned it last week, very drunkenly.
I think you did.
So Ben Askren and Front Row Brian have a show which is kind of similar to Ben Askren's old show, the Filthy FRB show, which I happen to have the shirt of, which I just found in a pile of clothes today. So I was like, oh shit, I actually have that. But yeah, it's exactly what you think it would be. It's Ben Askren and Front Row Brian hanging out talking shit, mostly about MMA and stuff they're doing. One thing that's interesting about it, so it is a subscription-based show. It's essentially a podcast, but there's no RSS feed that I saw. I'm sure there's a way to do it, but it's on Rockfin, ROKFIN, which that's an interesting format. So Rockfin is kind of like if you were to take, I would say like Drink TV or one of those like subscription-based things and combine it with Patreon. Because if you subscribe to the premium version of Rockfin, you get access to all premium content across all of Rockfin. And it's $10 a month. So it's one of those things where essentially if you subscribe to it, you're getting access to, it's not like a Patreon where you're just getting access to that one show. It's like if Patreon made it so you paid whatever, $10 a month and you got access to all Patreon shows. It's kind of interesting. That's pretty bad. Yeah,
I like that.
So as of right now, the only MMA stuff that I saw was mostly Aaron Weinbaum, who is Ally Quinta Realty on Twitter, and he's the fake Ally Quinta. Yeah. He also has the Aaron Says What podcast, so he does some premium content on there. Adam Hunter, the MMA Roasted dude, does some premium content on there. Mostly it seems to be early release of his episodes. And then Ben Askren and Front Row Brian are another one. I also saw a couple things put up by, I think, Izzy Martinez and a couple other people, but I haven't had time to look into it yet since I just signed up today. But overall, I don't know if the value is quite there yet for $10 a month, unless you're just a diehard Front Row Brian, Ben Askren kind of fan, which honestly, I miss the Filthy FRB show. So the Funky FRB show, I guess it should be called, is right up my alley. But so I listened to the first episode and the fourth episode. It's only audio for the time being. They're doing either weekly or twice a week, and it's just fun. They talk a lot about Ben versus Masvidal. And this was taped before the Masvidal fight was actually announced. Ben, wow. Yeah, Ben at one point mentioned that he was never actually offered the Robbie fight, the rematch. So they didn't, like, the UFC never actually brought that to him. They also talk a bit about how Holly Holm seems to get constant title shots. Front Row Brian at one point, since he is... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I said that's a good point. I didn't mean to interrupt you when you were talking about Holly Holm getting a...
No, you're good. So Front Row Brian, in classic Front Row Brian fashion, explains why Betch Correia was paid to take a dive against Ronda.
Look into it.
Yeah, I believe the phrase, "You really think Ronda Rousey can faceplant somebody like that?" came up at one point, which is great. And then they talk about Conor being the quote-unquote Irish sports star. It's a fun show. If you can't stand Front Row Brian, you are not going to like this show because it's a lot of Front Row Brian. However, and if you can't stand Askren,
then you're fucked.
No, if you can't stand Askren, you might still like it a bit because Askren is...
I thought you meant if you don't like both. Then you're fucked.
Well, yeah, if you don't like both, you're super fucked. But Askren is much better in long-form podcast, especially on podcasts, than he is on like tweets or those like MMA Roasted or the Boom Roasted videos. All that stuff is like, whatever. It's the easy shit that Askren can just turn around, but I really like him on podcasts. He's clearly well-read and is just very articulate in the way he thinks about things and comes up with, and he's not afraid to say, like, to change his mind and feel different about something. So I find it pretty interesting. And then I also listened to so that was the first episode they did. Their most recent one they put out, which I believe was just a couple days ago, was episode 4. They talk about the UFC presser that they did. And they say this is where I believe both Front Row Brian and Askren said that they've heard they've heard Colby and Masvidal aren't really cool with each other anymore.
Oh.
So, and I feel like if those are two motherfuckers who are on the inside in a way that I feel like they would know about that kind of stuff. So I thought that was interesting. They also talked about how John Jones was obviously partying in Atlanta when he blew off the presser. And
that's why he was just, sick.
They basically did everything but 100% confirm it, like in a statement. They also talk about. Go ahead.
I would say even Dana during that press conference, they're like, so I was like, where is John? And he's like, oh, Holly. He's like, oh yeah, he's like sick or something. She's like, I don't know.
Yeah. He has a head cold, if you know what I'm saying. Anyway, they actually talk a bit about how Ben seems to be growing on Dana. And Ben at one point mentioned that Dana cut him off before he got to use the line, I move more needles, or I what was it? I moved the needle more than TJ Dillashaw, I believe was the line he was planning on using at the press conference, but Dana cut him off, which is fucking classic Ben Askren writing. And then they also talk about how many podcasts and shows and everybody talked about pirating the pay-per-view since it was so fucking hard to order, evidently. Yeah, and I say evidently because I may or may not have pirated the pay-per-view. May or may not. I'll go full British job on this.
I'll just say this: I watched it.
I definitely watched it.
Yeah, I watched it. My friend Jake, friend of the podcast, he said he had no problems using ESPN Plus. So it's probably, I imagine, it was region based.
Like, it was probably region based. I know if you ordered it on desktop, theoretically you were cool. It was all the other stuff that was broken. So
that's what I do. Well, since I can't do it anymore, it sucks. When I would order through Fight Pass, well, you know what? Fight Pass was I fucking worked on my phone.
Yeah, I think you can still do it through Fight Pass.
I feel like at once or some shit, getting groceries, or I could be going on a beer run. Like, well, guys, half hour till, I'll just buy it now. Okay, we're all good to go.
No, for sure. But I think you can still technically buy it through Fight Pass, or at least that's what I've heard. I'm not sure if you actually, or maybe it's UFC TV. I don't know, something like that. But anyway, it's so overall, it's a good show. It's definitely one I'm going to listen to going forward. So I guess I'm now a subscriber of Rockfin, which I keep trying to call Rofkin. Rockfin, ROKFIN is a bad name for a thing because I'm always going to type that into a browser wrong.
Yeah, interesting.
It's no Drink TV. We'll put it that way.
So, I think what I'll do is I'll get into the off-topic podcast.
Sure, yeah. So the podcast for a well-rounded fight fan as a co-main event podcast.
So you already mentioned this multiple times. It was this past weekend with Theo Vaughn. I listened to the segment where he interviewed Dustin Poirier, and I thought it was great. Yeah. I remember watching the end of the main event, and I saw Theo Vaughn just super fucking hyped. Like the camera caught him, and he gave Dustin a hug, which I thought was great.
It was hilarious, yeah. And it was a pretty short interview on the podcast this time. It was just like, I don't know, like 10, 15 minutes maybe? Something like that, 20 minutes maybe? Yeah. But I liked it.
Yeah, I think it was about 15 minutes. Yeah, they were talking about the fight against Khabib that's coming up. Dustin says, I expect – he says it's great that my 2-year-old daughter recognizes I'm a champion. Yeah. And I remember, I think Dustin I saw on Instagram, he posted up a video, and his daughter was worried, like, basically saying, in how a 2-year-old would explain it, holy shit, your face is messed up, Dad. What's wrong?
Right.
I thought that was great. He expects to be more ready come September. Theo asked him, what's that feeling like of a team leading out of the octagon? Dustin says to him, it feels like you're a gladiator being led out to fight to the death. Theo describes the fight game as Christmas time, but Santa's there to kick your ass instead.
And he's real pissed.
Yeah. Dustin says fighting is 25 minutes to make life fair. I thought that was a really good line. Really interesting.
Yeah, he also said he was a fan of Teddy Atlas's podcast, which I thought was interesting. Yeah. I've been hearing a lot of news about that podcast lately. I haven't actually listened to it. I probably should.
I mean, Teddy Atlas, if you want any sort of insight on boxing in general, that's the guy. I mean, former.
At least nowadays, he's like one of the few OGs left. Him and Freddie.
Oh, he doesn't give a fuck. He'll speak his mind. I remember it was Canelo versus Triple G1. He's just like, this is absolute nonsense. Like, he didn't give a fuck. Even Paulie Malignaggi is like, yeah, what the fuck are they thinking? This is a garbage decision,
Yep.
And that's when I like Paulie. Fuck the whole bare knuckle thing. Paulie's a fantastic commentator. He's fantastic analyst.
He's good.
Yeah, he's great if you're a boxing guy. And then lastly, Theo said, if anyone would have rushed the octagon, I'd have your back, Dustin. but I also make sure to bring a pillow in my backpack because I know I'm getting knocked the fuck out.
Yup. Fucking Theo.
I thought that was great. So that's what I had for my op.
It was a fun one for sure. I definitely recommend people check that out. That's episode 190 of this past weekend. Let's see. For my well-rounded, neither of mine are actually podcasts, so I'm cheating. But I had Tales from the Grind, which you and I talked about this week. I know it's been all over Reddit and everywhere in the last couple of weeks. But it's the old show that Masvidal and Colby Covington did together, where like they're just like hanging out and training and going on dates and going to Vegas. It's fucking weird and hilarious, and they say some fucked up things in that show. I believe Masvidal calls his brother, it compares his brother to Dr. Gonzo, to the lawyer from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, during the hotel room scene where he's with the young Christina Ricci. We're like, bro, that is kind of outing your brother for some heinous shit.
Yeah. That's not a good hindsight wasn't there.
Yeah.
It's funny as I saw comments on YouTube like, wow, I don't hate Colby anymore. It's like, well, you're slow, first of all, but good job.
It's like, it's obviously a bit with Colby. It's obviously a fucking bit. But also, if he's on the wrong side of Masvidal, which it sounded like he was, like Masvidal's been ducking any Colby talk lately, other than saying like, "Hey, I'll find my." I've said before, I'll find my mom for the belt. So.
Oh, I guarantee you, it comes down to which fighter does Dan Lambert want to kind of say, "Hey, he does," and he probably chose Colby. Maybe
I don't know. Maybe I know Dan Lambert loves him some Colby, but Jorge's still at ATT, so.
There's probably just some sort of friction. It probably just comes down to who's getting that title shot. I mean, if I was just right now, I want to see Colby and Usman like now, like in the summer.
Yeah.
That's if I were matchmaking, fucking let's make that happen. Like I've said before, I think that's a lot more competitive than people think.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun either way. Well, fun in the way that I like wrestle heavy game plans where two dudes are just going to wrestle till one of them dies from exhaustion.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that'll be fun either way. But yeah, so that was good. And then my other well-rounded show that's not a podcast is I don't know if you saw, but Tom Kreischer and Bert Chrysler. I did that on purpose, by the way. Tom Segura and Bernd Chrysler.
Oh, the Truth or Dab?
Yes, we're on Truth or Dab, the Hot Ones like mini-sodes that they do. It's fucking great.
I like that one.
Yeah. It's super funny. So check that out. It's definitely worth it. And then some also rans that I had. Let's see. Behind the Paywall was really good. Jeff Sherwood and Jeff Sherwood and TJ DeSantis on their show had Paul Buentello call in, which is great. You probably don't. I don't know if you would know who Paul Buentello is. Old school UFC fighter. He is the classic dude who fought Tank Abbott 2 times. Is it 2 times or 3 times? I know the last time they're both very fat and in a backyard rolling around, which was a lot of fun. But he calls in and he's hilarious. They actually talk a lot in that about some of the old school days of like fucking Militich fighting stuff and old days at AKA, and it's just really interesting and informative, a lot of fun. So I highly recommend checking that out. And then some other ones that I got, You're Welcome, which we talked about, which is Chael's show, where he talked about some of the Bodog memories, I believe was the name of the episode. That one was dope as hell. Coast to Coast Combat Hour, the doctor is in with Dr. John Lucas, who is SC MMA MD on the MMA community forums, I believe. But he was great. They talked a lot about how fucked up the pay-per-view got because of ESPN. And he talks a bit about, like, from a doctor's standpoint, from a doctor who does, like, athletic commission stuff, all the bare knuckle cards and how he feels about it. Also, RIP to Frankie NYC, of course, forum member who passed away, and they talk a bit about that. Valley Tudo Hour, episode 16, Michelle Watterson was on.
I missed this one. How was it?
Well, let's just say it's Hinach and Michelle Watterson. It starts out early, talking about how Hinach is going to make Michelle a cocktail with, oh God, what was it? it was some like legit liqueur and then cheap champagne, like fucking real cheap champagne. I can't remember which off-brand.
Like throw Grand Marnier.
Yeah, no, it was
with some shit champagne.
Not Grand Marnier. It was like I want to say it was a cognac or something. Or no, you know what? It was the orange Alizé, I believe.
Right.
And he was gonna put that in like fucking the barefoot cheap champagne, which is not good. Yeah.
Oh god.
It's hilarious.
God,
he also keeps constantly making fun of her anytime she brings up her husband, which is double funny. It's a lot of fun. It's a pretty good one. Submission Radio episode 185 was solid. Akamoto called in or Skyped in to talk about the Izzy and Kelvin fights. Iaquinta Skyped in, which was cool. I love Iaquinta. And let's see. Whitaker Skyped in to talk about the Kelvin and Izzy fight. And Luke Rockhold called in. Basically, anytime I see that Al Iaquinta and Whitaker are on a show, I'm going to listen to that show. So
wasn't Whitaker starting to actually kind of trash talk a little bit, which he usually does?
Yeah, a little bit. He's been talking a little bit of shit about like respectfully. Like he even clarifies, like, I know when I say this that every time I talk, Izzy starts getting real bent out of shape, but I'm just saying from a technical standpoint, this is what I'm seeing. So it's just funny that how he couches it. And he's like, it's not that I'm a nice guy. I just don't care. I don't care when they're talking shit. It means nothing to me. I'm not looking shit that they say up. I don't really care. It's like, yeah, that checks out with your personality, bro.
I kind of feel like I have that mentality too. Like,
yeah, it's like, yeah, that's
don't feed into the bullshit. Really, I mean, it's just, unless you're promoting yourself that way, and that's how you get fights. Okay, then,
Yeah, for sure. I think also during that, Whitaker talked a bit about how he's currently replaying Fallout 4 as like a giant asshole. Like that, he's just picking all the dick answers in every dialogue exchange and just trying to like constantly fuck everybody over. Just hilarious.
That just makes me disappointed in how much of a failure 76 was. And I didn't even play it, but I could already know how much.
Oh, dude, I heard that announcement. And I was like, oh, this is going to be garbage. It's the worst fucking. How the fuck are you going to. Like, they fucked that up on multiple fronts, even if they had done it correctly. But like, even if they had done it correctly, it still would have been a broken system because Fallout is all about dialogue choices and your effects or your choices having an effect. And by nature, if everyone is in the same world, then they no longer have an effect. And also, you can't really interact with anything. It's like, it's real. That game was broken by design. Anyway, the only other ones I had was Jerry MMA Show episode 62, where Brendan Schaub came on and just kept talking about how he didn't illegally stream the fights and how they weren't in super high quality and were very easy to use, which was hilarious that he would straight up went on Rogan's podcast to do that. And then MMA Takes talks about how Brian talks about how he went to UFC 236 and was in the building. So it was kind of cool to hear that perspective. But that's what I got. It was overall a pretty good weekend podcast. I wouldn't say one of the strongest ones, but considering how fucking rough some of this St. Petersburg card is, I was surprised that there were this many big ones.
Yeah, as was I.
Cool, man. Well, we will go ahead and I guess we'll take a quick break here, and then we will be back shortly to do our picks for the UFC St. Petersburg Olenek versus Overeem card. We'll also talk a little bit, since I did a little bit of research and I looked into it, I'll probably talk a little bit about Ryzen 15, which is happening. So the St. Petersburg card is 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. We're recording this Friday night. And then I believe around 11 p.m. West Coast time is when the Ryzen card starts. So it's going to be a long 420, everybody.
Yeah, I'll get into it in a second. I'll see you guys then.
Yeah, so we will be right back, and we'll be right back. Farts potty.